In the first two parts of these series, I talked to Chris about his updated economic outlook for China and for the U.S. state of California. And this third part, we bring it all back home and talk about just how the recent election results and other trends in the economy shape the future of the United States. What is the economic future of the United States? And why it's going to be a bright future for particularly millennials and Gen Z in the decades ahead. You see a lot of doomer content elsewhere, but this video is kind of be a hybrid of debunking the doomer and economic futures and kind of synthesizing in a way that shows, you know what, there's actually a lot to be hopeful about. And also, in general, if you have any questions for me about your specific situation in terms of life, financial, investments, etc., feel free to contact me directly through the contact form on my website or via email. And now let's go back to the interview. We've talked about California. We've talked about China. Let's talk about just the USA as a whole, because that's one of the questions people ask me. Like, what's the economic future of the U.S.? What is your overall outlook now on the U.S. economy? It seems like you're in agreement with me that we might have some short-term pain because really anything worth having in terms of meaningful structural reform requires some sort of resistance and struggle. But in the long run, it's going to be a very big boom for America.
Well, I think that the nice part about America is it destroys itself regularly. I mean, if you were a founder and you were living on this little like 100-mile strip with giant mountains over here and, this land here, and then you had this ocean full of, friends like the Spanish Empire and the French Empire and the English Empire that, wanted to take you, you needed to move fast and break things. And so the American story is willingness to trust people to do that. The Constitution that is written in America, the way it plays out, it is very inefficient for government and very opportunistic for the people. Now, the government clearly tries to take that back every cycle, and these cycles last for about 45 years. The cycle starts at the end of wars and economic turmoil and some new technology, some new idea, some new business opportunity creates great productivity, which of course is wealth, and you have this spurt. And because California is the tip of the spear in this engine, it tends to happen on the upside first in California, in a big way. And then it drags the country with us. And 45 years later, it rolls over in California, and we end up taking down the country with us. And that just prepares us for the next cycle. So where are we in the cycle right now? As I've said, California, the business model it has imploded. Its tax business model has imploded. It is going down hard. Its ports, which are the big engine, this whole export-import is shrinking fast and at the margin very fast. And so you are positioned again to the model is going to change. And it's going to change. If you fly over California, it doesn't look like Metro Los Angeles. It looks like, Merced. So all of that is out there, and California has these incredible resources. We talked about, is there going to be an oil boom here? Absolutely, I believe that. Is America going to re-platform, on new technologies that are coming out? Of course. So I believe it's America's resource wealth, whether it's water or whether it's minerals, are spectacular compared to the rest of the world. Its transportation network in the form of water is the best in the world, and its water resources are the best in the world. So I believe that we are headed for another boom. What the drivers of that boom will be, clearly space is part of it. There will be there are other issues with material science that are on the bubble to really explode. in a big way for an opportunity. But I think America is going to do we have the easy ride going forward. So I'm very optimistic for America. I'm very optimistic from your generation um, that as we become much more self-sufficient, as we have a little robot buddy like you talk about, I think we leverage all that um, and we leverage it from a favorable platform. So I'm
That's
very optimistic
refreshing.
about America.
That's refreshing to hear because like it's very common here on YouTube that a lot of other Gen Z type economic commentators or analysis or millennial thought leaders in the world of business and finance and economics tend to have a much more doomer worldview. Say like, oh, you're never going to be able to afford a house. You're never going to be able to afford a wife and kids. Um, your your job is going to be replaced as soon as they possibly can with an AI. And yeah, you're going to live a much worse life than your parents. So, what do you say to the doomers out there? Like the
Well,
people
I
say
think you're in
25 to 35 young men who feel despondent.
well, I think you're in revolution right now. Didn't you just flip the script? I mean, you did this. I mean, Trump is you. It's all these people under 29 years old that showed up to start voting
Yeah, it was like
at
the
the
first time since
margin.
Reagan in 84 where young men voted net to a Republican Party.
Right, they flipped. My generation grew up and then we met Jimmy Carter. I mean, we thought that our sort of liberal ideas of the world were great because we're going to bring everybody up. Nobody suggested to us until Jimmy Carter got there that we were going to come down so everybody could be at the same level. Jimmy Carter convinced a generation that, nah, not buying that stuff. I'm going to go to Plan B. So I think that Biden, I mean, it's really kind of sad
He's basically our
that,
Carter.
you were told you had to believe Biden was this, world leader. I mean, you couldn't believe your lying eyes, right?
Yeah. Because that story you mentioned about Carter reminds me of my father and how he got um, really irritated with um, the Keynesian economic worldview that was dominant in the 60s and the 70s. And his generation really flipped basically because of the ineptness of the Carter administration. And I'm seeing something similar with what happened during the Biden administration. You had a big surge of inflation due to bad economic policy and a stagnant economy, and people want to change. And so you're basically saying that this election result is the change, it's the turning. We don't need some bigger crisis that sends everybody into poverty or war. Like we're or we might have a little bit of a recession coming up, but a lot of the hard steps have gone through. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I'm saying that you're now voting your own self-interest.
Yeah.
That you can't be you're not confused. You've learned about inflation. You've learned about, wage suppression. I mean, those are two bad things. Inflation here, wage suppression here. That is your generation is learning about that. And, they're seeing this outsource of, economic opportunity to the third world or, you may be a college educated person, but if these people down here are being replaced by illegal aliens, eventually somebody will figure out how to cut your high wages because there's more reward for cutting high wage jobs than there are for cutting low wage jobs. And that game, I think, has ended, and your generation is on the launch pad. I understand that technology seems like it's sort of failing. You've run out of people are leaving Silicon Valley because the semiconductor chip productivity growth has fallen off immensely. The opportunities in colleges now are more for foreigners than you. You just voted Trump in. Don't you think you're going to vote out the people that take your place in universities? Shouldn't those be your spots in education?
Well, yeah, I mean, young men have largely been starting to opt out of school.
Right.
I think that's not necessarily the best idea, but I can see why that's the case. But do you see that? But the thing is that I'm talking more about the generation who's already finished college or they're past the age of going to college. Like, what is it gonna? How's their life gonna turn around? Like
Well,
again,
I think you want to always, you always want to compete for, you always want to be on a winning team.
yeah,
You get all the medals, you get all the rewards, you get all that kind of stuff. You've been, America's been sort of playing to go sideways. The growth opportunities have been anointed internationally, and you're supposed to get along with this. I think that reshoring, reindustrialization of America. Remember, whoever has the newest factories will have the lowest cost and the most productive products, right?
yeah.
China was able to take this $3 trillion of multinational money and leveraged it 15 trillion and have the largest, cheapest factories, the highest production capability, and take market share massively. That's over. So you're going to build the new factory someplace. The new factories are going to be smaller, and you don't need all the little hands, right? I mean, this old thing, the assembly with little hands and fingers, that game's over. You need kind of like junior college education so that you can operate machines that cost $5 to $7 million, like a 5 axle lathe, they're going to pay you $50 an hour to do that with overtime. I think that is going to make you very interested in, having a family, having a house, and sort of going back to what you want, but you can't have.
So you think a lot of like the cost of living crisis is going to be solved from much higher wages across the board?
You can't starve your way into happiness.
Yeah,
You have to drive your way
I've learned that you
into
can't
success.
save your way to being rich.
Right.
You got to
Right.
increase the top line.
Yeah.
But
And so I think that's what Trump's all about. And I think he's got a constituency now that we'll see over the next 2 years whether he can grow that constituency to become it's a movement now. Can he institutionalize it into a gigantic voting bloc that changes the world? That's in the cards. That's what they're doing.
and how do you think the recent election results have changed the trajectory for the economy? Like, what do you think is going to be the biggest shift that's going to happen now versus, say, if Harris won?
Well, I think there are two issues that happen. First of all, you're absolutely racing to a financial crisis with financing the debt. So, one of two things have to happen. Either you keep growing the debt and you impoverish the people and have a depression, or you rationalize the system, cut the non-productive costs, which clearly is in the illegal aliens and the subsidies and all that kind of thing. A bankrupt California becomes a real opportunity for economic growth, right?
Yeah.
That the rules change, and things like fracking. The largest fracking opportunity in America is in the Monterey Shale. Everybody knows that, but there's not the infrastructure to support it, and there's not the ambition among the voting block of inner city voters to support it. That's already flipped.
So do you think that so in terms of just about nationally, what do you think is going to be what is of Trump's economic policy ideas is the most intriguing to you that you think is the most real upside that is not being anticipated? For me, I think it's if this Department of Government Efficiency actually has any teeth and we're able to generate the same level of government services at a lower cost. Like the example would be like look at what Musk did with X. He is able to basically offer the same product, maybe slightly better, but with 75% less of the labor force.
Well, X is a perfect example because
If you
remember,
can do something like that
Yeah.
to maybe cut the government spending, say, by 20%, but you provide the
Well,
same level of service. What does that mean for the economy? That's what I think. But I want to know what your answer is on
okay.
this.
My belief is that you have not only government, you have this other layer out there, the not-for-profit sort of, extended government, the other 12 to 15 million people that, are basically doing government jobs on a contract basis, usually for a hell of a lot more than you could, that even unionized workers could do it for. It's sort of justifying itself with more and more programs, bigger and bigger spending. Um, I think you're going to rationalize all that out. So, government has had a really good run. That game's over. They're going south fast. Could you cut a third of uh, of government employees? Not so sure you can do that. Could you cut half of the government management overhead? I'm positive you can do that. So you're going to have this. Remember this when you do span of control studies. How in the 70s, span of control was like 5 people. If you were a manager, you had 5 reports. Now it's closer to 12 to 13 reports. None of that took place in government. Government probably is probably somewhere around 5 to 6. So you're going to take out this huge layers of very expensive overhead in government. And that in itself is going to change the equation. You ask government workers, do they like the expansion of the services and the rest of it? They'll probably tell you that's not what they would do. Regular workers could tell you how to run government better than the managers. So I think there's a massive rationalization in that layer of cost. But more importantly, it's the regulatory change that's going to open up a huge boom because all of those, I mean, the Green New Deal was, green for certain people who, were in the bureaucracy or some industries that, were associated with the bureaucracy. For example, Musk made his, electric car company off subsidies, right? Once he ran out of subsidies, he became a capitalist. So I think that the subsidies are going away, and you're going to make decisions based on economics, and government is going to be for economic expansion because they're going to be desperate for funding. And that's
And
going to be great for your generation.
do you think that this is a little bit, I don't know if you might not be in your range of expertise, but I mean, do you think that the deregulation in driverless cars will mean that basically we won't have to waste time commuting anymore?
No, not at all. I think that the driverless cars are, just imagine what the roads are going to look like between 12 at night and 5 in the morning. They're going to be all these trucks doing their deliveries and everything. And, when people come in the morning, all their inventory, just in time inventory has arrived. They're moving the transportation units over to get charged. And, you're going to have your day. So
No, but I
just
mean, like instead of
by
people having to sit behind a wheel, like in the morning, you can like, I don't know,
well, but if you
read, just
took
watch
if
this
you
video instead of driving, which
but if you took all of that, commercial delivery out of the system, can you have any idea how much during daytime that you would free up capacity on roads?
a lot.
Spectacular, right?
Yeah.
I
But I
mean,
mean, well, we live in a world that nobody's gonna have to drive anymore with by the end of
I
the
think
year.
people like their cars in America. It's all about freedom. It's very cool. The rest of the world doesn't have that opportunity. The first thing they do in a developing country is buy a car. People
Yeah.
love.
I mean, I like the idea of having a car personally, but I don't like the actual practice of driving. I love my car could drive itself and I could watch YouTube videos or relax while the car's doing its thing.
Yeah. I mean, you are, I mean, I had an aviator, and it was pretty damn close, you had to have your hand sort of around it, but it took care of itself. And, in 10 years, you're going to you want to drive, you drive. You want to not drive and have the car drive, you flip the switch. That is a choice that'll make, owning a car even, more valuable to you. But I think it's this, my thing about, autonomous vehicles is if you can get all of the big rigs off the road because individuals don't do well driving at night, there tend to be more accidents and such like that.
Yeah.
So if you can get the big rigs, driving themselves and following the rules and doing their deliveries in the morning you come in, that would be a spectacular increase in productivity. It would reduce inventories, drive profits.
And then other than any other noteworthy like economic policies from the administration, apart from deregulation that you want to comment on?
I think space is just the most incredible opportunity. It's go west, young man. We're going to be manufacturing in space and, in zero gravity environments where you can do incredible things. We're going to be exploring, one of these asteroids that flies by, if somebody could lasso it, it's worth more than all the wealth of the world right now. So we are moving into the greatest pioneer boom in history. And yeah, as you've watched Elon Musk destroy the world's rocket industry, he's done it as someone who doesn't know the rules. He came from the outside. There are other companies forming really fast to compete in that. So I believe that in 10 years, we will be mining and manufacturing up there.
And how does
And
this all affect defense spending? Like, if you have companies like Anduril and SpaceX competing for contracts, does that mean that the incumbent defense contractors are going to have to take much lower bids? And that's how we're going to reduce defense spending without reducing actual military force?
I'm not so sure we're going to reduce defense spending. I think we might get more sophisticated. Anduril's Palmer Lucky's company, right?
Yeah,
It, and remember in Butler when they said there were no drones in the air
yeah.
when Trump was the assassination? He Lucky Palmer was testing his anti-drone drone, and that was most inconvenient for people to see. These drones that literally slash through another drone. That's how they take them out. They were testing them there, so that's a disruptive change to all the anti-missile programs that are out there. So I think that Boeing has shown that it is not competitive and is a massive restructuring. Lockheed Martin, which is producing the F-35, I mean, that vehicle is not competitive. When the Israelis decided they were going to go bomb Tehran and had 100 jets to do it, they started moving towards Tehran, and all of a sudden, the Iranians turned on a new radar system that painted all the stealth bombers. Most inconvenient, right? So now you have to go to another. So you built these huge aircraft carriers, you know, that have planes that can fly 500 miles back and forth. In World War II, you had small aircraft carriers, and the planes had to fly 1,200 miles in order not to get blown up. So all of our military has to flip. I think there's a tremendous military boom coming. It's just going to be different. It's going to have different participants. You're going to have lots of startup companies, and they're going to be embraced, especially by the Trump administration. And in fact, they have to be embraced. So brand new industry, that industry is going away. And just like in disruptive America, we're going to flip to something new.
So I just better wrap up the bull case is cheaper natural resources, cheaper housing due to less immigration and deregulation, and the fact that you're going to have, um, just in general, a lot of deregulation and technological innovation. You're going to have a startup boom that is the bull case for young people in America, essentially.
Well, that's this 45-year cycle I talk about.
Yeah.
You know, this cycle is run out of gas. You're going down, war all over the world, economic problems, blah, 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 blah. You just got to wash away the old and bring on the new. And the only country that can really do that is the United States. And of course, the most dynamic part of the United States is California. So each time this works, and the election of Trump just told you your generation is not happy with the game that's being played, and they want to try something drastically different. That's America.
Yeah, well, and the other thing is, let's play the other side of the coin. What are some risks in the macro economy that the administration and the financial markets are failing to see that could cause the recession that we're afraid is on the horizon?
Well, I think you're going to have a dollar crisis. You're going to have a financing crisis. I mean, remember, if you're going to go, if you're not going to be international, if you're going to be nationalist, why are these people going to buy the dollar, right? Why are they going to use the dollar as a reserve? I mean, I don't believe in America should be the reserve currency, because what that really means is you got to bail everybody out. So I think that the exchange rate of the dollar could drop dramatically, and this financing crisis, with debt compounding on debt, I think there's a real risk you go to 8% 10-year bonds, and that's just going to devastate a lot of existing leverage in America, which is probably what you need to do. You need to have a debt restructure, and that's it. So, bad is good, but
Yeah.
painful.
And do you think that the American people will have enough fortitude to absorb that kind of pain and not just vote back the policies that brought things here to the first place in 28?
At the end of the 30s, they were willing to change. At the end of the 70s, they're willing to change. And now they're willing to change. They've had enough of this. Um, your generation is not looking for another 20 years of this kind of cycle, right?
No.
So walk away from it. Walk into the light. Your betters, older people like me, there's for most older people, they think things are just fine. For most younger people, they're not happy at all.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you look at the
About to
inflation
flip.
rates between people over 55 and under 55, they are very different. And if you look at like the relative wealth for adjusted age, it also provides a very contrasting picture. And the thing is also, I think might contribute to this is how's the impact of the generational turnover and the great wealth transfer, which I've talked about in previous videos, where you have boomers are turning 78 this year, which is life expectancy, but the boomers who have real assets, they live on average till about 88. And with these people starting to get old or leave the workforce or die off and pass their assets down to the next generation, what is the big economic implication of that, and how does that affect your outlook? And also, with that change, will that also mean a decline in NIMBY voters and anti-development or anti-growth initiatives that have plagued extremely California, but the nation as a whole? And so, where's generational turnover just fit into this whole story?
Technology. Technology is making people like me live longer. And so we're going to live longer than longer. So this is a moving target as to life expectancy. So your generation should not really expect, you know, that these numbers, as far as when the plan for you'll inherit your parents' money. I think your parents are going to outlive their money. That's just a fact. That's been happening more and more, and so you need to get over it. That's not where what happens to older people is they start running out of money, and then they size down. So they're going to be sellers of real estate, but they're probably going to live technology could take you In 10 years, you could have a life expectancy that is increased by 15 years. And in 15 years, you have a life expectancy increased by 30 years.
Like if
So
you were
I think
born in 1990, how long do you expect to live to? Like
I think
120,
most people are going
130?
to clip 1990 people are going to clip 100 easy, 100, 110. There's no reason you can't make that.
Yeah, but like since the dawn of time though, we've been able to improve lifespans. Like people aren't dying at heart attacks at 40 anymore. But at the same time, like the max about 120 really hasn't been broken. Like
That's right.
is the innovation in biotechnology there that we're going to see people break that 120 mark consistently? Like we've seen
Well,
people break
I
90 consistently now.
yeah, I think you can break the 100 to 110. Past that's right. Past that, you you're going to need a new body. You're going to need a plug and play, and maybe to whatever that is in the future. It just it's something we can't even talk about. I'm just saying that life expectancy should not be what life expectancy is expected right now, because the technology curve, is going straight up. I mean, even the ideas of that you're not going to be obese. That's a nice word for saying you're not going to put so much pressure on your body that you're going to be dying off early. There are drugs for that now.
Yeah.
They're going to be drugs for lots of things that are going to be life extension. Just lose 40 pounds. America lost 30 to 40 pounds. They'd live 8 to 9 years longer.
How does the RFK's um, takeover of the Department of Health and Human Services affect all this, if anything?
Well, I think it's going to, make made in America more valuable. Remember, a lot of this stuff all the drugs in America come from the third world. That's where the
Well, they're
production
invented here. They're manufactured over in
they're
India.
manufactured there. But when they come from the third world, is that volume or is that volume or is that quality? So I think that we take way too many drugs. I don't take statins because I don't see how how you get much of a big benefit from taking statins. Yet it's prescribed to virtually every senior in America. I think that we're going to have small is good. You're going to allow greater amount of um, risk of try. What's the right way to say it? The right to choose, the right to risk. That new drugs coming out, that was COVID. That it was a right to try.
Yeah.
Trump put out there. Then of course the bureaucracy said it was a right for the bureaucracy to make it a standard for Pfizer. So I think you're going to really bust up these big pharmaceutical companies. You're going to have a lot of creative small ones. Watch TV right now, and I'm on Hulu. I'm watching Shogun, and I've never seen more pharmaceutical commercials because they understand that the ability to advertise on TV is about to go away.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen some statistics that Fox News, 75% of their primetime ad revenue comes from pharma.
Well,
And
I mean,
it's
pharma, they got to get it now because I guarantee you that when RFK comes in, he's going to drastically restrict the ability to.
if he has, do you think he has the power to actually do that? Which I think would be a great step to get rid of advertising pharmaceuticals um, in America. But if he does, how does that affect the business model of the mainstream media with a lot of their revenues dependent on these companies? Will we see CNN go and Fox News go bust?
Aren't we looking at the mainstream media right now? Isn't this what's happening?
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean that's why I'm bullish on YouTube because people can actually go and see a lot more diversity of opinions, and this is where and it's not bought and paid for nearly as much. So I think people are coming to YouTube, including this audience, because they want to hear things from more directly from people with expertise versus just some media platform that has an inherent bias and is not honest about it.
Well, remember, I do mainstream media interviews all the time. And it's very structured and we know where we're going. It's not the chaos of what we're doing right now. But I think people are, they have their own capabilities. They'd like to see other ideas and then they can weigh them and balance them. That's not what you get in the traditional media. Look at Trump and the podcasts. I mean,
Yeah.
Joe Rogan. I mean, literally Joe Rogan, with his, I think they had what, 48 million views of the Trump uh, interview in 10 days. I mean, isn't that kind of like the Super Bowl or something?
Yeah.
I mean, so if that's the new Super Bowl, so having really good podcasts, or where you go. I have my product is mountaintoptimes.substack.com. And you really move the ball when you do things in writing and you back it up with podcasts. I think that's what really is important is you know, you introduce an idea with podcasts and then you back it up with the written word where people can process through those ideas. And that isn't, catching eyeballs as they come in and out. That's focusing on attention. And, when you have somebody's attention, you can do movements, right? And I think
Yeah.
that clearly Trump has proved that what he did with 300 and he raised 358 million and he was elected president after spending about 318 million. That compares to Kamala, who spent $1 billion over a 90-day period and is $50 million in debt. I mean, the economics of what Trump did have changed everything to do with politics and probably down costed the use of media. I mean, it doesn't cost as much if you've got a new idea with real capability. You can get that out now for a fraction of what it costs to advertise on something like CNN that nobody watches.
Yeah, I mean, that's what, and also the things you can, on top of that, if I wanted to see somebody who had the opposite worldview of me and everything, and I wanted to see where I was wrong, I could just search it on YouTube and there'd be plenty of examples. And that's what the luxury of these platforms are, is that like if you go on to a channel like mine as a guest, I'm actually going to ask you hard questions. I'm not just going to throw you softballs. And that's what I think helped, I think, Trump win, is that he wasn't afraid of taking harder questions. And the candidates in general, whether Democrat or Republican, who are more willing to take hard questions, I think will do better in future elections because it shows that they're more honest, for
So
one.
you're going to be voting for someone, not about someone.
Yeah.
Okay, you're not going to get this little fluffy outside thing. Somebody's going to drill down on them, and they're going to actually have to have real ideas. What a concept! What a disruptive concept for a new generation to be the richest in the world.
Well,
Getting
I think if
down
you
to
have
the
more real ideas out there, I think
right.
it will allow for better ideas to come to the top and have a more prosperous society because of it.
A
And
lot
I
of
think that,
imprints are going to lose. A lot of big, entrenched uh, powers are just shaking right now. This is the worst thing could ever happen. On the other hand, young people like you should be going, my turn.
yeah. I mean, how do you think about the fact that President Trump won the popular vote means for social stability? Because now that you had an election be as decisive as it was, means that people aren't really going to question integrity really as much anymore. And I think elections in the future in the post-Trump world are going to be a lot more mellow and moderate because of
I
this.
think society has made a right turn and they're going to march in that direction even more as we go through 26 and 28. Because remember, I still think you're in the crisis. I think you're coming into the worst part of the crisis. Remember that when Reagan came in, all all hell broke loose
Yeah,
with
the
interest
recession of
rates, right?
81 and 82 was the bottom of the generational bottom of the stock market. It was tough
Right.
his first
Yeah.
2 years.
But he was the country was willing to make that change. They were done with the turmoil of the 70s. They wanted to move to the next level. And I think we're going to go into a massive amount of turmoil with interest rates. You know, a bunch of industries are going to bankrupt. You're going to have a real repricing of real estate. I mean, all that's going to get changed. And on the other side of it, you're going to have a lower cost platform, more efficient, and just a hell of a lot of
Is
opportunity.
this kind of what happened in 82? I
It's
wasn't
exactly
alive.
what happened in the 70s. It was actually happening in California in 78 to 81. It was we were already there. It was the rest of the country was behind. It took them until almost, it took them to 82, 83 to see the benefits. But Californians, after Prop 13, it scared the hell out of the bureaucracy, and they started changing, and the state started opening up. So our economic boom started before the rest of the country and the Reagan boom. And the same thing is going to happen now.
Hmm. Yeah, that's any final comments about the future of America or like what the outlook is for like your future millennial Gen Z American watching this and yeah, and what you're excited about before we wrap this up.
We win, they lose.
And you're referring to we as just like the American people.
America. I think this is a group of people that, we're not all the same, but somehow we kind of coalesce every once in a while in a great movement. So I think that we will coalesce in a new movement led by young people like you that's going to be glorious in every way. It's going to be rough to get there, but it's going to be worth it, and people are going to be united. And 5 years from now, I think you'll see a tremendously lower amount of political and ideological turmoil because we start to win again.
Yeah, I mean, the 90s were the least um, politically volatile era in the last 100 years because the economy is good. Like, desperate times call for desperate measures. The worse the economic conditions are or perceived to be, uh, the more radical political solutions people propose, and vice versa. So if we get a real restructuring of the economy and like a place that is generally more broad economic opportunity and the distribution of that economic opportunity being more accessible, especially to younger generations, yeah, I think you'll have a more mellow politics and we can care a lot less about it and we can focus more about business opportunities or
And family growth, and you start winning. You start out with a dog, then you get a wife, and then you start having a house, and then maybe I have some kids. I mean, all of that historically, it has gone through big cycles, big spurts. So I think an amazing thing I think will be, that this once your generation gets very, very positive about what's coming, I think you're going to have a tremendous increase in the number of babies. I like babies.
yeah.
They're our future, and more important than our future for a family, they're our present. They're one of the greatest rewards in life.
Yeah, I look forward to the day when I have a family, but I have two nephews now and they've become like the center of the family already.
I mean, Rugrats are great. Especially if you feel you can, if you feel you're winning and you can afford it, and you're in an environment where you have some stability and some opportunity, you're going to go for those traditional issues.
And if people want to reach out to you or see more of your work, how do they find you?
Well, you can find me on mountaintoptimes.substack.com. Um, but I do a lot of interviews, I do a lot of consulting, but that's where my ideas are. Right now, you'll find out that I'm very involved in the restructure of California. I am the CEO of New California, which intends to break the state into two pieces. So I'm kind of a fellow that's out there trying to mix it up.
All right, thank you again for joining us. And yeah, if I don't talk to you before that, have a Merry Christmas and Happy New Year.
Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and Go America.